Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963.
The ancient work shall be accomplished from the roof. Evil lightning shall fall on the great man. Being dead, they will accuse an innocent man of the deed, the guilty one hidden in the misty copse.
In quatrain number 637, Nostradamus appears to make a reference to the Kennedy assassination. And there's two lines that really stick out in my mind. The first one is, being dead, they will accuse an innocent one of the deed. If you stop and think about it, Lee Harvey Oswald was the self-admitted patsy of that crime. In my opinion, he was the one who was falsely accused.
The quatrain continues with a reference to the guilty one, hidden in the misty copse.
And if you look up the definition of the word copse, you'll see that it describes a small thicket of trees and shrubs. And being one who lives in Dallas, I can tell you that that's an exact description of the infamous grassy knoll.
Another quatrain, written in 1556, apparently foretells of the misfortune that would befall another U.S. president, Richard Nixon.
The old man shall be baffled and deprived of his place by the stranger that shall have instigated him.
This vague passage may predict the disgrace of yet another U.S. president.
Honor to be blinded by lust. The offense of the adulterer will become known, which will occur to his great dishonor.
Believers say this quatrain refers to the White House scandal involving Monica Lewinsky and then-President Bill Clinton.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Quatrain number 228 allegedly predicts tragedy for another renowned figure, Princess Diana, who died in Paris on August 31st, 1997.
The penultimate of the surname of the prophet will take Diana for his day and rest.
The first line has been said to refer to Dodi al-Fayed, the son of Harrod's owner Muhammad al-Fayed, whose name resembles that of an Islamic prophet. The second line, his day and rest, may refer to Sunday, the traditional Sabbath and the day of the week that she died. The words day of rest may also refer to the public holiday on the day of Diana's funeral. All shops and businesses were closed in England as the world shared an outpouring of grief for one of the most popular women of the century. It may be hard to imagine that the prophecies of Nostradamus were actually written in the 16th century, an age so radically different from our own. Yet, much like his contemporary Leonardo da Vinci, Nostradamus seemed to describe technologies which no one of his time had ever seen.
Earthly and watery fish is thrown upon the shore by a great wave, its strange form wild and horrifying. From the sea to the walls, they instantly reach the enemy.
Nostradamus definitely predicted airplanes, submarines, and a great deal of modern technology.
At night, they will think they have seen the sun. They will see the pig-like half-man. Noise, shouts, battles seen in the heavens.
Is this fighter pilot the pig-like half-man of Nostradamus's vision?
We can see that even though he saw these things, he didn't quite understand them, and he saw them very much as modern marvels. Airplanes in particular seem to have been a double-edged sword. He could see that they would have benefit, but he could also see that they would be a great instrument of war.
Some Nostradamians believe that his writings describe the First Gulf War with its massive troop movements, stealth technologies, and burning oil fields.
Very nearly 1 million men toward Persia. The true serpent will invade Byzantium and Egypt. He will enter wicked, infamous villain, tyrannizing over Mesopotamia, the land horrible and black in appearance.
Nostradamus uses ancient terms for certain areas of the world. Libya, Persia, the Middle East generally, Islam, Mohammedanism. He talks about men with turbans.
Many experts suggest that there is another quatrain even more specific to the recent war waged against Saddam Hussein.
He will be unable to protect himself by sea. Between two rivers, he will fear the military hand. The black one, irate, will make him regret it.
Quatrain number 633 appears to be a reference to combat and military activity in Iraq. And the two lines that really hit me hard are the lines, between two rivers, he will fear the military hand. The black one, irate, will make him regret it. So it appears to me that this is a reference to combat in and around Iraq, because Baghdad is located in between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which are two of the oldest rivers in history. The black one, making him regret it, might be a reference to Colin Powell making Saddam Hussein regret his actions.
One thing is certain. Nostradamus seldom wrote about peaceful times. The majority of his quatrains deal with destruction and loss. One of his designations for impending disaster has come to be recognized as the comet.
After a great misery for mankind, an even greater approaches. The great motor of the centuries is renewed. It will rain blood, milk, famine, iron, and pestilence. In the sky will be seen a fire, dragging a trail of sparks.
If you look at the comet and the trailing clouds of sparks quatrain, then you begin to see that that idea of a comet and the shuttle disaster sort of overlapped each other, that they became part of the same metaphor, part of the same image.
But the comet of Nostradamus's quatrains may signify more than looming tragedy.
He does talk about comets, but usually as presages to an event, not that we're necessarily going to be struck by a comet.
In fact, some believe it may be Nostradamus's indication of a series of events that are unfolding right now.
When the comet shall come, Mabus shall come, and soon after shall die. Of people and beasts shall be a horrible destruction. Then on sudden vengeance shall be seen blood, hand, thirst, famine.
When we start looking at some of these quatrains that apparently relate to our time period, we have to look for anagrams, we have to look for events, we have to look for interpretations that maybe are not apparent on the surface.
Quatrain number 262 names an evil leader or leaders by a strange name, Mabus.
Mabus is an anagram that is apparently made up of Osama bin Laden and George Bush, components that go together to make Mabus. So apparently Nostradamus is pointing us to a time period in which, from his point of view, it was very hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys. Just there was a lot of strange stuff going on and things blew up.
Are the tragic events described by Nostradamus in his Mabus quatrain already happening?
At 45 degrees, the sky will burn. Fire approaches the new city. Instantly, a huge, scattered flame leaps up when they demand proof of the Normans.
Regarding the events of 9/11, there are several key words contained in 6 or 7 quatrains that really seem to reference that tragedy. One is a reference to a huge fireball that leaps up into the sky.
Experts also point out the line that contains the new city.
The new city being a reference to New York City. And if you think about the line, the great new city, and you put a blank between new and city, you can easily put York in there, and you can realize that the new city was the illusion that Nostradamus used for New York City.
The most sobering line of the quatrain seems to predict the exact location.
At 45 degrees, the sky will burn is a reference to the events of 9/11 because the 45th degree of latitude travels across the northern edge of New York State.
Nostradamus seems to have written these verses about a country that was not yet born, some 3,000 miles away. But some experts are skeptical.
What I'd like the Nostradamus to do is tell us about the next World Trade Center disaster before it happens, not after. It's not fair to go and see what happened and take the headlines and go, aha!
In fact, many are convinced that Nostradamus possessed no special powers whatsoever and was, in fact, nothing more than a charlatan.
Just another one of the crank nonsense things that weak people believe in. There's not even any mystery about Nostradamus.
You are watching Nostradamus, 500 years later, on the History Channel. For nearly 500 years, the 16th century seer Nostradamus has been touted as one of the most important prophets in history. But he has also had his naysayers.
There's not even any mystery about Nostradamus. That's the interesting thing. I mean, we pretty much know that everything he predicts after the fact. You look back at something he's written that's nonsense, and then after it's happened, you're able to say, oh, that's what he meant.
Vagueness was part of Nostradamus' stock in trade. His prophecies needed to be catch-all so that a whole range of events could be seen to apply to them, so that they would cover almost anything that might happen in that general area.
Some skeptics believe this vague language was a device used by Nostradamus to launch attacks upon the leaders of his day without risking his own life.
When he said, you know, the three-headed beast or whatever, he could always then have an out say, no, I wasn't talking about our king, come on. Just talking about the future or something like that. In my opinion, Nostradamus was neither a psychic nor a con artist. I think he was a social commentator, much like opinion editorial writers today. He was writing at a time, however, when the idea of free speech and commentary that was critical of the political system or the king and so forth of the day was not allowed.
Why then do so many people continue to believe that Nostradamus was writing about the future and predicted such dire events as Hiroshima and the explosion of the 2 space shuttle missions?
People always want something to believe. I mean, they're always looking for the greater order to the world, and the idea that somebody 500 years ago might have seen our entire world makes it, I think, gives some people a sense of security that if they read his readings, then they know it's going to happen too.
Skeptics, however, are critical of Nostradamus's collected prophecies.
Where are the Nostradamus people in 1925 talking about the stock market crash? Where are the Nostradamus people in September 1963 talking about JFK in Dallas? Where are they before the fact? I mean, that is the easiest test you could possibly do on Nostradamus.
Nostradamus's first and most famous prediction was that the French king, Henry II, would die in a joust.
The young lion will overcome the old one in single combat.
But close inspection of this quatrain reveals little to connect it to a specific event.
It talks about the young lion overcoming the old lion. Well, Montgomery and Henry II were very close of age. It was not a young and old. And it wasn't on a field of battle. In fact, it was a game, a duel, on a gaming field. And in any case, it was an accident. They were just dueling. You weren't supposed to draw blood. It was a game. Try to knock the other guy off. The spear splintered and accidentally went through his helmet and killed him. So it was not at all like what's described in the quatrain.
Some say Nostradamus foresaw one of the most famous events in Europe's history, London's Great Fire of 1666.
The blood of the just will be demanded at London, burnt by lightning fire in 23 the sixes. The ancient lady will fall from her high place, and many of the same sect will be killed.
But these lines, written by Nostradamus in 1564, could also describe disturbing events taking place in his own lifetime.
Another famous alleged prophecy by Nostradamus was the Great Fire of London, but in actuality it was probably another social commentary by Nostradamus. This on the burning of the innocents in London, having nothing to do with a fire 100 years later, but in his own time the burning of women as witches. And the thunderbolts and the references to the flames and things that were burning is in reference to the lit sticks that get the bonfire going, to which you put the witch, the woman on, and she's burned to death. So he was horrified by this. And that was what the commentary was about.
Naysayers also offer an alternative explanation for the scientific breakthroughs foretold of in the quatrains. They believe Nostradamus was merely recounting the fanciful visions his contemporaries often reported seeing in the clouds.
The prophecies that are alleged to apply to submarines or aircraft or even space travel are, for the most part, complete misunderstandings of Nostradamus's reworkings of known events. In this case, visions that people were reported as seeing in the clouds. That's the aeroplanes. And not only do we have accounts of these, but we actually have illustrations, woodcuts of these monsters and these visions in the clouds. So they're not aeroplanes, they're not submarines.
The figure of Napoleon Bonaparte is said to be at the center of several quatrains.
An emperor will be born near Italy. He will cost his empire very dearly. He will be found less a prince than a butcher. From a simple soldier, he will attain the empire. From a short robe, he will attain the long.
But while the verse seems to describe Napoleon, in truth, it could be about anyone.
The quatrain that allegedly has to do with Napoleon talks about from a simple soldier he will attain a great empire. Of course, this could apply to almost anybody. I mean, Harry Truman, for gosh sakes, who was a simple soldier in the First World War. By the end of the Second World War, he was president of the United States and dropped the atomic bomb. This could apply to anybody.
For Nostradamians, the clearest and most chilling of the quatrains seem to describe Adolf Hitler.
Beasts wild with hunger will cross rivers. The greater part of the battlefield will be against Hister.
Hitler is nowhere predicted in Nostradamus. True, on one occasion he talks about a captain of great Germany, which I suppose would vaguely fit. But the normal assertion is that because he uses the word Hister, H-I-S-T-E-R, on a number of occasions, this is actually a slight reworking of the name Hitler.
Why wouldn't he just write Hitler? Why not just write that word? That could be important, you know?
And if, as many believe, Nostradamus' prophecies addressed the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, they offered nothing in the way of warning.
Anyone who believes in Nostradamus and thinks 9/11 was in those books needs to be brought up to trial. Where were they on 9/10? I don't care about 9/11, because remember, it was airplanes, which means if you knew on 9/10, you could stop it. If I had a book in my possession that had anything at all about what was going to happen on 9/11, and I did not give that information over to people who could stop it, I don't think you have a more direct textbook definition of evil.
Despite the rational arguments criticizing his most outrageous prophecies, Nostradamus continues to be seen as a prophet by many.
The world is interested in Nostradamus every time there is a serious world crisis, because we open the text of the prophecies to find an answer to the crisis.
And if the printed word has been his vehicle for the last 500 years, the events of 9/11 propelled Nostradamus into a medium even he may have never predicted.
One of the real manifestations of Nostradamus of recent years has been the hoo-ha following 9/11. There were over 8,000 inquiries as to whether Nostradamus had predicted it, directed to the main Nostradamus news group on the internet. At the same time, the main Nostradamus sites were being absolutely inundated with inquiries. One of them had over 500,000 inquiries and had to close down.
In the days after September 11th, Nostradamus was all over the internet. It was one of the top searches in Google. The #1 best-selling book on Amazon.com was a biography of Nostradamus, as well as 5 other books that were in the top 25 best-selling books in Amazon.com. So he was everywhere.
This chilling prophecy, allegedly penned by Nostradamus, was splashed across internet screens 2 days after the tragic attacks.
In the city of God there will be a great thunder, two brothers torn apart by chaos. While the fortress endures, the great leader will succumb. The third big war will begin when the big city is burning.
But Nostradamus died in 1566. He could not have written this passage in 1654, and the quatrain was not to be found in his published work. It was a hoax. Still, while skeptical inquiries put his so-called predictions